If you are right now dealing with some wrist discomfort, this video is for you. Okay, you may be wondering why some people can do handstand, do push-ups and planks, and they're okay, and you may be struggling with wrist discomfort even with daily activities. In this video, I'll give you a protocol for working on improving range of motion in the wrist and reinforcing the muscles around it so that that wrist is not giving you troubles. If you do a lot of gymnastics, calisthenics, weightlifting, and also yoga, Pilates, and on top of that, if your occupation or hobbies involve manual work, you will be exposed to potentially that overuse of the wrist. I myself did yoga in my 20s, and over that decade, between 20 and 30, I've probably done thousands of chaturangas, which is kind of lowering phase of the push-up to the ground. Wrist joint, like most of the other joints in the body, is a synovial joint, which means that two bones or more come together, and the surfaces of those bones are lined with cartilage. So it's a smooth surface that surfaces should be gliding one on top of the other, and it's surrounded by synovial capsule that releases synovial fluid, which means there's a lot of lubrication happening in the joint. And of course, you've got surrounding ligaments that reinforce that joint. And in some places, there are also muscles and tendons that cross. Wrist itself, it's a combination. We call this radiocarpal joint, and that's the combination of a radial bone, which is one of the two bones in the forearm, coming into contact with the carpal bones, which are the tiny bones in the base of the hand. We've got here the scaphoid, lunate, and trichotrum with little pisiform on top. So that's the proximal row. There's obviously another row a little bit further away. So think of this junction as your radial carpal joint, right? And that's a lot of hinging, so flexion, extension, and also radial and ulnar deviation. Radial because it's the side of the radius bone, and ulnar deviation because there is a bone called ulna, and those two come together here. This joint itself, really, there's no muscles that support this area directly, right? Like, with the hip, you've got overlying glutes and hip flexors. With the shoulder, you've got your pecs and you've got your delts. So the joint is surrounded by a lot of cushioning, right? A lot of muscles, a lot of soft tissues. When it comes to the wrist, you basically can feel the bones, right? So you've got soft tissues such as just the ligamentous structures, and also plenty of tendons of the wrist flexors, and long tendons here of the wrist extensors, right? And also some muscles that go long tendons of the muscles that move the thumb, move the pinky, move the fingers, right? And if you can look at the shape of your hand, there's a little concave here, a little dip. And that's what we call a carpal tunnel, where a lot of tendons go through, specifically 9 tendons, and also a median nerve that supplies sensation and also motor function to those deep muscles of the hand, and also sensation to this area of the hand. Let me first explain the difference between active and passive range of motion. Passive range of motion is what we refer to when the joint can be moved by external force, because I can push my wrist all the way here. Yeah, that will be passive range of motion to extension, flexion. Active range of motion will be when you use your muscles to move the wrist extension, wrist flexion, right? When we talk about passive range of motion, we refer to flexibility. When we talk about active range of motion, we talk about mobility. This channel, flexibility, is just the base, and my focus is on this deep joint strength, stability, mobility, right? Where there is an active component to it. When it comes to wrist, it's all about wrist preparation. I want to show you first of all, like a rehab protocol for simply daily work to go through all the ranges of motion of the wrist with control and with intention. And also few drills called pails and rails, progressive and regressive isometric loading for the joint, so angular loading. And we will be trying to create more active range of motion in extension, because that's what you need if you're planning on doing push-ups and planks and handstands. If you want to stay fit and you want to do bodyweight exercises, you will need that wrist extension. Let's start with the first wrist protocol. This is your controlled articular rotations. So watch my wrists. Make sure the forearm is not moving. If you're doing this, and your forearm is turning, you're actually using your proximal radial ulnar joint. So it means you're doing a pivot, right? Or you're doing a pivot over here. The bones are crossing over. So you're basically doing supination, pronation and supination. When we're working on the wrist, do not move that joint, okay? This is not what we're training. You want to purely focus on this junction of the radius and the carpals, all right? So ideally, if you're new to this, start by holding a forearm and then going through the motion. Go slowly through the wrist extension actively, go to flexion, and make sure you're aware, ulnar deviation, radial deviation. Now combine slowly, maximum wrist flexion, going into ulnar deviation. So I'm gonna do a little circle. I'm going into wrist extension, right? Trying to keep my fingers straight, max, and then slowly going to the radial deviation. And then slowly coming back to wrist flexion. Okay, so this is how this should look like. If you watch my forearm, my inner forearm is facing up and it's not moving. This is the correct way to do wrist calls, okay? It's not that, you know, you're not trying to do dance moves, okay? If you're struggling to keep your fingers straight, because you will feel your wrist extensors, right? The muscles that actually straighten the fingers as well. So you can do a fist, create a fist, and then go through full range of motion, yeah? Now let's move on to pails and rails. So first, check the passive range of motion of your own wrist, and then compare the passive range of motion to the active range of motion. Then let's translate it to the ground. Find the end range. Just remember to keep the palm flat on the ground, including the heel of the hand. And then we start deploying our pails, pressing down into the ground, like you're trying to bring the wrist back to neutral for 5 seconds with 10 to 20% of your max strength. And then you do the opposite, trying to lift the hand off the ground. Here we're working on the regressive angle and wrist extensors. You can progress into deeper range if you can, but you don't have to, and repeat the process 2 more times. I guarantee you'll feel like bending the elbow, so keep your elbow locked so the movement comes purely from the wrists and you're not compensating. So guys, this is it, your wrist mobility protocol. Let me know in the comments how you get on, okay? Try to do this daily, especially before wrist loading activities and training. And hopefully you'll notice a difference. I certainly did. And remember that if your wrists are uncomfortable, right? If you're feeling discomfort after doing planks and push-ups, just give them a break. I'll be talking more in the future videos about problems coming up here in the elbow with the kind of fatigue of the forearm muscles, whether it's the flexors or extensors, all right? So, but we will cover this in other videos. This is purely about biomechanics of your wrist. See you soon.